our religion, our faith tradition, our skin color, no matter what country we're born in, or even our behavior. Dignity is part and parcel of our humanity. We all have it. It is unwavering, immeasurable, and we all naturally yearn for it to be recognized. And I would argue that we all have experienced in some way a dignity violation in both small and large ways, where we have felt that our dignity has not been recognized, has not been seen. We can all think of a time when that has been true, I would argue. So this morning, we're going to use this dignity lens, which I've created. It is a lens that I have thought about and offered in this book, Dignity. It has 7 strategies, all based on the 7 letters of the word dignity. And I'm going to use that to explore our own barriers to authenticity, to excavate our own truths and identity as we work towards more authentic living and to create sustainable and lasting change. So are you ready to work with me on this? I would like to hear from you. Yes. And I want this to be interactive. I would love for you to, as I said, to create a brave space where we can really kind of work together and to share some thoughts and insights together. And I do want to say that this is not easy work. Even in the scripture in James, it says it is hard work. Dignity work is not easy work. It is hard and it is courageous work. It's a set of strategies I am going to offer to you that will not give you answers, but rather will ask some provocative questions. And it invites you to reflect and to grow in some new competencies. I'm going to use some photography and some poetry to engage with you, and I will ask you to share and reflect on these strategies together. If you'd like, please take out a notebook and you can take some notes, and I hope that you're willing to take some risks and to share some thoughts with each other. So I'm now going to try and do this. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Let's say here. Okay. I'm going to share. Okay. Tell me if you can see this.
Yes.
If I do that, can you see anything moving?
Not yet.
No. And can you see this right now?
We can see the puzzle.
Okay, good. Perfect. Well, that's perfect. That is just perfect. All right. Well, here we go. So I have created this dignity lens with these 7 strategies. It is not linear in any way. It doesn't have to be. These strategies are not set up to be in that one, you have to do one before the other. It truly is circular, like in your eyes, as it is a lens. And it is cyclical, and there's no one part that is better than the other or needs to be done before another part. Each part is absolutely integral to this work. And I want to say that as we think about our individual levels of looking at ourselves through the lens of dignity, I'd like for you to also think that this was actually written for institutions. So any time I presented on this work on dignity, people would ultimately come up to me afterwards and said, can I put this on myself? And it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? As we think about our institutions, institutions are made up of individual people. And if we are not treating ourselves with dignity and each other on that level, then how can our communities become that much more authentic and that much more effective in the work that we're planning to do? When I looked at institutions, what I was concerned with was what we say, our mission statements, our vision statements, what we say that we want to be, and our lived reality. And I'm really interested in that gap between the two, what we say and what we do. And this passage in James is talking about that very thing, that gap between what we say, who we say we are, what we say we believe.
Did you want some stew or a sandwich or?
I think we, okay.
Mute.
All right, so let us begin here. All right. So for the purposes of today, I'd like us to begin with identity. Why not? Let us begin with who we are, who we say we are. And the question that is often, that I've used with identity is, who are we? Our identity is our anchor. It drives our work, our purpose, and our work. And if you are managing to negotiate between both yourself and your community, just think about your institution. Who do you say we are? What is our identity? Who are we? So I'd like to share with you, thinking about your I am statement. Let's consider that. And I'd like to introduce to you this poem and this poet. Her name is Melika Gisa Fatafihi, who is a proud Black, Indigenous, Pacifica, and West Asian writer. Her pronoun is they. They descend from the Zagareb and Daureb tribes of Mer Island in the village of Fahifa in Tonga. They perform poetry, write criticism, and breathe life into words. Now, I want you to think about who you are, remembering that our identity includes all of who we are, our histories, our cultures, our upbringings, our hurts, our pains, our accomplishments, our joys, and they may even include the most unflattering interpretations of who we are. Okay, as you think about that, I would like to read you this poem because in many ways, what she has managed to do is to capture all of who she is, all of her journey in this particular poem and in her name. Her poem is called Say My Name, and I'm going to read some of it, and I'd just like for you to just listen and meditate. My name was my name before I walked among the living, before I could breathe, before I had lungs to fill, before my great-grandmother passed and everyone was left to grieve. My name was birthed from a dream, a whisper from gods to a king, a shout into the stars that produced another that shone as bright. They held me without being burnt, humming lullabies in pidgin. My name was passed down from my ancestors. They acknowledged my roots grew in two places. So they ripped my name from the ocean and mixed it into the bloodlines of my totems. My name has survived the destruction of worlds and the genocidal rebirthing of so-called ones. It's escaped the overwhelmed jaw of the deathbringer many a time. It has survived the conflicts that resulted in my gods from both lands knowing me as kin, but noticing that I am painfully unrecognizable and lost. They are incapable of understanding the foreign tongue that was forced on me. So excuse me as I roll my eyes or sigh as you mispronounce my name over and over again, or when you give me another that dishonors my mother and father, that doesn't acknowledge my lineage to my island home, or the sense of rainforest and ocean foam. You will not stand here on stolen land and whitewash my name, for it is two words intertwined, holding as much power as a hurricane. Say it right, or don't say it at all, for I am Malika. I will answer when you call. My question for reflection for you right now is recognizing that it is much easier to share the great parts or the Facebook or Instagram reel of your life. What is the hardest part of your I am statement for you to articulate? What is the hardest part of your identity that you find it difficult to articulate? You can think about those answers. You might write them down. You might think about your identity. Of course, there's a lot of work here. There's so much to get through, but if you feel like compelled to share something, please do. Or we can just keep on going.
Well,
yes.
I was going to say, Beth-Sarah, we, as a parish, just underwent the Sacred Ground program through the Episcopal Church, which you're probably familiar with. So I would say that one of the hardest aspects of to recognize in my own identity is how I have inherited some difficult truths in my ancestral past.
Thank you for sharing that. Part of what is so wonderful about an identity audit, to be able to look at your identity both as an institution, as an individual, is to think about, just to be vulnerable enough to share those parts of our stories that are just difficult to share. Those parts that we may feel ashamed of or embarrassed about. There is a lot of power in being vulnerable. And sometimes just being able to articulate those parts does not mean that there's any condemnation, there's no judgment. There is nothing like that. What it is to embrace that part of us and to learn from it or to change the ending of that story. Our stories are ever evolving. And so we can always address certain parts of our past in order to make a different outcome into the present and the future. And I think that's the type of work that is very difficult for institutions and certainly very difficult for individuals to do. But it is important work. The next tenet is diversity. Who is here and who is missing? The question that I ask about diversity is to assess, interrogate, and leverage the diversity in the community. Dignity connects us regardless of our differences. Now, again, I want to ask to pause and sort of release what you already think about that term diversity. It has become laden with many, many emotions and laden with different meanings. But the word diversity simply means differences. Leadership expert Ron Heifetz, I don't know if you know him, he is out of Harvard. And he has, and I quote him in my book, he says, people don't learn by staring into a mirror. People learn by encountering difference. We are all different and we all have dignity. And embrace your unique path. Embrace your unique journey. Your timeline is different than others as we think about ourselves. Comparison is futile. No one else is like you. There is no prescriptive way of being or achieving or attaining your aspirations. There are only descriptive ways, and you are at the center. Be curious about others around you. Be open to learning new perspectives. It helps us to distinguish for ourselves our own path, our own non-negotiables, what we will embrace and what we will hold on to. My question for thought and just meditation, as we think about diversity, simply difference. We all have differences. Even identical twins have differences. We all have the same dark secrets and the same bright hopes. We come from the same place, excuse me. Oops, we've gone back, sorry. We're going on a little bit of a roller coaster journey here as we go through. Here we are. We all come from the same place and are headed in the same direction. Above everything else, maybe we all want to be known by each other and to know each other. So on an individual level, this is certainly true for us. And I would like to think about, for your reflection, what have you learned or understood differently from someone else with different views or a different perspective than yours? We have just come through and probably are still in a season of grave and very distinct differences in our country. They have been revealed in so many ways this past summer, and certainly through the election season and even now. And it's very difficult for people to think about how we can learn from each other or even engage with others, especially when there's so much differences in ways we believe and what we think about, how we see the world. But I'm going to ask a question that maybe many of us haven't thought about, but what have you learned from someone else who thinks differently from you, or for someone else with a different view or a different perspective than yours? How have you been able to engage in that kind of a conversation? What have you been able to learn? Just to think about that. It's not easy, but important.
I think one thing I want to offer up here that I've been sort of working on is the idea that dignity is so important for all of us. And if there are groups of people whose dignity is being taken away by others, they develop their own stories about themselves to preserve that dignity. And in some cases that in our recent history has, I think, gotten to be really problematic, where we've had alternative realities developing. But I think at the heart of that is this problem with people not feeling respected by others.
Yes, people not being seen, people feeling like they're not being seen. You know, there's a lot of work done on dignity in societies and countries and politics, thinking about that there are great revolutions, wars, that really at the source of it all is that people have not felt as if their dignity has been seen. That's how important dignity is. How to whole communities, whole societies have felt as if they have been invisibilized, not being seen. If you think about your communities now, your immediate communities, even in your family, who is not being seen? Just something to think about in your even in your families, in your church, at your workplace. Who is missing? Who is around? Who is seen? Who is not seen? The next tenet I would like to work on is yield. See that? What do we want our efforts to yield? And how do we know if we've reached our goals? The underlying question here regarding yield is, what do you want? What do you want as a community, as a church, in your workplace, in your family, in your life? What do you want? It's a profound and yet very simple question. And even Jesus asked it over and over again in the Bible in different ways. What do you want? When he encountered the man by the pool, the healing pool, he had been there for many, many years and had ailments in his legs, but could not get to the pool. He said, every time I try to get to the pool, I can't get there. There are people who are taking the space. I can't get there fast enough. And Jesus asked him, what do you want? Do you want to be healed? And he said, yes. And Jesus said, well, pick up your mat and walk. So the question is, was that man healed in his mind, or was that man healed in his legs? What do you want your efforts to yield? What do you want as an individual? What do you want as a community? What are your aspirations? It is simple and it is clear. When the dignity lens is applied to institutional authenticity, yield is grounded in data, both quantitative and qualitative. And for us, and for this conversation now, you might consider, what are your aspirations? What do they look like? How are they manifest? What is the feeling or the image or the sound that captures that aspiration? And how can you measure if you've gotten there? How will you know if you have attained what it is that you want? Do you by any chance know who this person is? Anyone?
You?
Can you see her? That is Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner who survived being shot by the Taliban for wanting to be educated. In this picture, she is covered in cake and in celebration of her graduation from Oxford University. What did she want? To be educated. That's what she wanted. That's what she was striving for. And that's what nearly cost her her life. The question for you now is, what boundaries are you willing to surmount to achieve your aspiration, your dream identity, on an individual level, in your institutions? What boundaries are you willing to surmount to achieve what it is that you want? She risked her life. What boundaries are you willing to surmount it? What risks are you willing to take? The T in dignity is transparency. What is our story? How do we tell it? Know the purpose and tell the story. Our stories make us who we are and who we will become. There is not only power in giving language to our stories, there is power in owning our stories and even writing new endings and in sharing our stories. Toni Morrison said, language alone protects us from the scariness of things with no names. Language alone is meditation. Stories are the currency for dignity. Stories are the currency for dignity. You tell me your story and I'll tell you mine. In the dignity lens, we own all parts of our stories, even the parts we deem too terrible to tell. In sharing our stories, all parts of our stories, we can shed a light in the darkness, or healing, or forgiveness, or friendship. All of these can be revealed, a resolution, a new way out, a new way of being by sharing our stories. Knowing your story is essential in achieving your aspirations, both on an individual level and an institutional level. What is your story and how will you tell it? Are you able to own your entire story? As was mentioned earlier, there's some parts of our history that we are not so proud of. How can we own that story, embrace it, and move forward? Even institutions have stories. What is the story of your institution? Even the parts that are most unflattering, and how can we communicate that story in a way that will be helpful and to create the robust and healthy community? The question for reflection here is going to be provoked by this beautiful image which I encountered. And I'll tell you a little bit about this image. It is part of a larger project of a reconciliation program in Rwanda. The people who agreed to be photographed here are part of a continuing national effort toward reconciliation in that country, and worked closely with a community called AMI, Association Modeste et Innocent. It's a nonprofit organization. And here, this program, they get together small groups of Hutus and Tutsis, if you are familiar with the genocide in Rwanda. They who were pitted against one another and where genocide occurred. They were counseled over many months, culminating in the perpetrator's formal request for forgiveness. And if forgiveness is granted by the survivor, the perpetrator and his family and friends typically bring a basket of offerings, and the accord is sealed with song and dance. Well, in this image, the gentleman, his name is Habyarimana, he said, "When I was still in jail, President Kagame stated that the prisoners who would plead guilty and ask pardon would be released. I was among the first ones to do this. Once I was outside, it was also necessary to ask pardon to the victim. Mother Cecilia could not have known I was involved in the killings of her children. But I told her what happened." He shared his story. "When she granted me pardon, all the things in my heart that had made her look at me like a wicked man faded away. And she said, many among us had experienced the evils of war many times, and I was asking myself what I was created for. The internal voice used to tell me, it is not fair to avenge your beloved one. It took time, but in the end, we realized that we are all Rwandans. The genocide was due to bad governance that set neighbors, brothers, and sisters against one another. Now you accept and you forgive. The person you have forgiven becomes a good neighbor. One feels peaceful and thinks well of the future." This has just been surprising to me. It's just always astounding when I look at this work, which I found this just a couple of years ago. So they are doing this work right now. And the Most Reverend Desmond Tutu, the architect of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, set upon the creation of that difficult work. He said, "We contend that there's something called restorative justice, in which the end is not punishment, but healing, rehabilitation, the restoration of harmony, the redressing of imbalances. It is to work for a different kind of society based on transparency and accountability, on the recognition of the infinite worth and dignity of persons created in the image of God." What does this have to do with achieving that authentic identity? Consider your own story, your own truth. Do you have the capacity to own and tell your story? The reflection, how will you tell your story? What is so powerful about telling our stories is that we don't know what the ending is going to be, but we have a lot of control. We can change our stories, or we can account for the parts of our stories that we find very difficult to tell. And if these two people, after the atrocities that this man caused this woman, are able to tell their stories and somehow create out of that some form of reconciliation, what can you do? How will you tell your story?
I know one of the things that our parish and our diocese has been discussing is a kind of inventory of our history. And I'm encouraged that I think that our parish is going to be trying to delve into some of that work, but it feels like a brave act kind of to even start, because you don't know what you're going to find when you start. At the start, you don't know.
It takes courage, takes bravery, a certain amount of vulnerability. We have to take these risks, I think. We do. It's important work, not easy, important. And I think that at the end of it all, sometimes we feel that everything is going to be hunky-dory and we'll all be best friends if we just share our stories. And that is not the case. These people, for example, I'm just always astounded by their story, but that doesn't mean that they've become best friends and that it's all hunky-dory, but they have managed to create a space where transparency and accountability is forefront, and where we can share the difficult parts and make sense of them, to perhaps create some sort of harmony in some way, some sort of restoration, an adjustment as we close the gap between who we say we are and how in our lived reality. There is a way that we can sort of close that gap, to have a working relationship built on mutual respect, just so that we can see the dignity in one another. Maybe that might make a great difference. The next tenet I'd like to look at, that is the one I, is integrity. And we ask, are we doing what we say we're doing? Are our actions aligned with our identity? Shame and vulnerability expert Brene Brown, she defines integrity as, and I quote, choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply professing them, end quote. This tenet is about accountability. Am I holding myself accountable to the aspiration that I hope for? In the book, I introduce a concept which I've called an integrity audit. An integrity audit. Imagine yourself floating, temporarily suspended in air, with these dignity glasses looking over your life. What do you see? Are your actions in line with your identity? What gaps do you see? What are the blind spots? The moments of unused or underutilized opportunities, and even potential minefields or triggers. Consider that in your own life. Consider what that would look like as you consider the life of your parish. What are the gaps? What gaps do you see? What are the blind spots? What are the potential minefields or triggers? And this integrity audit is an act not to reveal failure, but rather to create opportunity, a reliable pathway forward as you progress to the very aspirations that you set out for yourself. What are the gaps? The question for reflection here is just that. What gaps do you see? So the image I have there is of Martin Luther King on the final dream. I'm sorry, that was the final Sunday sermon that he preached at the Washington National Cathedral 52 years ago. 4 days later, after that sermon, he was assassinated and permanently etched in our memories as a man who had a dream for his country and for the world, a dream that was rooted in the larger American dream and the dream that God has for us all, the dream of a nation and world community that values the dignity of every human being. He and countless others conducted these national integrity audits, holding their country accountable to the very dream that it articulated for itself. Hovering over, he and others could see the gaps, the devastating, traumatic gaps in our society, specifically around human dignity. Not only was he able to identify those gaps, but motivated others to partner with him to take up the necessary and difficult work of making progress on closing those gaps. So in your life, what are the gaps that you see?
We had a incident recently at our teaching English as a second language. Our goal has always been to respect everybody's culture and where they come from. However, we ran into a problem when we were teaching about how to address people who are not part of the cultural norm of many cultures, and specifically men marrying men, women marrying women. And this really upset some of our students, and because it came directly in conflict with their own personal belief. And we had an incident where I had to write an apology letter. And it was very much of a gap for me, because I truly believe in the dignity of marriage equality. And yet it wasn't respecting their particular religious and cultural views. And I don't know, I still don't think I did it right, but I did something at least, and trying to respect them without completely giving up and saying, oh, well, I believe something different, but I don't know if I did it right.
Well, I don't know if there's any right or wrong, but we all do what we can do and to make amends. But that's a very interesting situation in which people might also ask in this dignity work, how do I respect the beliefs of others, even if they contrast so much with my own, and still respect my own beliefs, not sacrifice my own beliefs? And it's, I guess, I think as we strive towards authenticity, I think it is important to be authentic to what you do believe. I think that's important. And also leaving space for what others may believe. I think it's important that we don't sacrifice or silence what we embrace, or what you, as an individual, what you embrace, but also to leave space for that. And to speak of it as, for other people might not agree with that, but to speak of it in such a way that, yes, this is what I we understand that there are different cultures, and you can acknowledge the differences and not be afraid to acknowledge the differences. I think. Does anyone else have any thoughts about that?
I think it's really challenging for all of us right now. And I, thinking about, I'm probably going to mispronounce her name, but Malala Yousafzai.
Yes.
The idea that, she wanted an education, and the society around her tried to prevent women from becoming educated. And so she was willing to lay down her life for that. There's a certain element with the bravery of it's almost like an invitation to violence, honestly, in some ways, that you care so much about something that you're willing to fight for it or lay down your life for it. And I think about it in terms of when these differences of opinion or different views or beliefs get so intense that there's actually a danger there. And thinking about the attack on the Capitol building and our understanding now about the power of white supremacist groups in our country, and thinking for myself in my own heart, it's very hard for me to respect that view and not to think I ought to be prepared to fight that view, and how to kind of try to disengage that fight response to leave room for other options. It's hard for me to figure out how to do that.
Difficult work. Remember the meaning of the word respect, to look again at, which does not mean to give it in any way, to give others a common understanding of respect is to give someone else's thought and so on a sort of value, to laud it, to put it up, and only certain people are worthy of respect. And my argument here is that everyone is worthy of the act of respecting, which is to be looked at again, to look at someone and to see the biases or understanding as assumptions, grave differences that I have with another, and to look again at that person and those beliefs. And I think there's something else here too, and it's always tricky, and we're all still trying to find our way through all of this, but when I reflect on that passage, James 3:17, when it talks about having a robust and healthy community that is right with God, I think that there are certain actions and behaviors that people may embrace that are not right with God, that don't create the promises and the ultimate dream that God articulates for life. Bounty, joy, and a full life, and when there is work towards creating, to the intentional work of invisibilizing and causing harm to others, that is not necessarily, I don't think, aligns with the dream that God has for us. And it's something to really ponder. I think everyone is worthy of being listened to, and everyone is being worthy of being heard, and trying to empathize with another's point of view, and trying to understand what is driving this thought and what is driving this approach to life and to work, what they're doing, what people may choose to do. And in that sense, yes, that empathy is there. But yes, it may come to a point where it's not a matter of inviting violence, but certainly it is taking grave risks in standing up and embracing what you really feel is right. I know I'm going around in circles a bit, I suppose, but there are a lot of people, as we look back in our history, of people who did stand up and took the risk of violence, as you say, and to make sure, to ensure that future generations could have what they believe is right and what is in line with the very, words that our country says, or that God has articulated for us in the Bible, that we understand that by, or what churches have said about what their beliefs are, or what the mission statements are, the vision statements, or the aspirations. I think we can see countless examples of people taking that ultimate risk. And well, I guess we have to decide for ourselves what do we do with that? Does that make any sense?
Yes, yeah.
It's a lot.
Whoa.
The next tenet is nurture. What new behaviors do we need to make? And I encourage people to become Imagineers, create an environment of experimentation and innovation. So what do you need? What do I need to cultivate and nurture our aspirations? What do I need to feed and support to bring this dream, whatever it may be, to fruition? What choices do I need to make in order to get where I want to go? So these choices are not easy, and they may feel uncomfortable, and perhaps they may even, as you said, invite violence. They're scary, they're downright foreign to who we are, but while they are necessary, know that any anxiety that comes with those should not feel destructive and consuming, but rather life-giving and energizing. So it is an invitation for us to remain open and curious about the choices we will make. And here is, some of you may know this person, Shane Claiborne, who is a Christian activist and an author, who is a leading figure in the new monasticism movement, one of the founding members of the nonprofit organization, The Simple Way, out of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. I was really struck by his words, and I quote him here in this image. We knew that what we were against. He was just in a conversation, he was describing his life as a youth activist, a social activist, a Christian activist. And he said, we knew what we were against. We knew not, we were against, we did not know what we were for. He was very well in a lot of protest, and he was always standing up for what he felt we were against. And then he said, let's build something new together. We're going to stop complaining about the church that we experienced and become the church that we actually dreamed of. So he decided, if you don't know him, but he decided to just create a church that he felt was more aligned with what he had read and understood in the Bible. He advocated for nonviolence and service to the poor. He decided to let go of what he was very familiar and comfortable doing, which was complaining against what he felt was wrong out in the world. And then he made the choice to act and create this church. And he decided, I was going to serve the poor. I was going to help. He just opened up this building and just said, all children are, welcomed. I'm going to help with homework. I'm going to help with food. If you're hungry, I'm going to feed you. If anyone off the street, if you're hungry, if you're, I am going to feed you. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do and live out what I actually believe. Alice Walker, the author, says, look closely at the life you are constructing. It should look like the dream that you are creating. Look closely at the life that you are constructing. It should look like the dream that you are creating. So the question is, what do you see as the imminent choice you must make to jumpstart your dream identity or your aspiration, what it is that you want in your life as a community? What must be the most imminent choice? What is the new behavior that needs to be taken up in order to jumpstart this new work? Finally, the last tenet is growth. Are we willing to grow in some new competencies? Reflect, imagine new ways of being. Be open to learning and always, always choose growth. Always choose growth. Undergirding this entire dignity journey is the ability to grow in our capacity to develop new competencies, to behave differently, to acquire new skills, to gain new confidence, to be willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable, to grow in our capacity for courage, for vulnerability, for bravery, for curiosity. Something we think we're incapable of doing. Sometimes we think we're incapable of doing certain things. It is fearing less, trusting and believing more, and recalibrating our expectations. Again, I want to introduce you to these two young people. This is Jean-Pierre and Vivienne. And Jean-Pierre, again, from the same Rwanda project. Jean-Pierre said, my conscience was not quiet, and when I would see her, I was very ashamed. After being trained about unity and reconciliation, I went to her house and asked for forgiveness. Then I shook her hand. So far, we are on good terms. Vivienne said, he killed my father and my 3 brothers. He did these killings with other people, but he came alone to me and asked for pardon. He and a group of other offenders who had been in prison helped me to build a house with a covered roof. I was afraid of him. Now I have granted him pardon. Things have become normal, and in my mind, I feel clear. Talk about radical forgiveness. I don't know about you, but that seems extremely difficult to me. And it's aspirational and inspirational that people are able to do things which I think are sometimes humanly impossible, but they managed to do this. He killed her father and her 3 brothers, and still they were able to share and see in each other a capacity. And there's something inside her that allowed her to grow in her capacity to forgive, and something inside him that allowed him to grow in his capacity to own what he did and to make a difference about it. It's just incredible from both perspectives for me. And again, the question is, what capacity do you need most to grow in? What capacity, what is the area that you need most to grow in, either on an individual level or as an institution in your parish? What is it? What is that area as a parish, as an institution that you need to grow in? What are the new competencies that need to be learned? So that's it. That is the dignity lens. Those are all 7 strategies for you to just think about. Look again at your own dignity. Look again at others. You matter. Your story matters. Each person's story matters. Dignity matters. More than anything, you are absolutely worth it, both on an individual level and as an institution. I know this is a lot, but it's a reminder, it's not what you look at that matters. It is what you see. And I hope and pray that we can all begin to see more of the dignity in others. And even as an institution, as we look at the issues that we face, how can we see the dignity even in the issues and problems and challenges that we face? A lot, I know.
It is a lot. I almost want you to just to do all that again, because I'm not done thinking.
Yeah. It's particularly hard, I think, it's hard for an individual, but I think it's extremely hard for a group of people, and that all these questions, like for a church community, by answering them, by doing them, you are going to create a whole different kind of community, which may be very uncomfortable for some people, and they're going to leave, because this is not the community that they signed up for. And that's hard. That's hard.
But what I find, so when I wrote this book, I say very specifically in it that this work it's not work that necessarily needs to be done by a leader or an expert. This is work that we can all take up on an individual level and start towards that. The thing is, as an institution, oftentimes we do have an identity of who we are, who we say we are. And when we see that there are gaps in place, that either we are seeing, hold on, I thought we said that we are focused on this. Is this really does this reflect that? And if we as individuals have the courage to be able to say that, to raise that up and simply ask a question, to be curious about it, not to make assumptions, not to be defensive, not to be belligerent, not even, it's just a question. Wait a minute. Are we doing what we say we're doing? What I like about this work, and I truly believe, is that we all, especially when it comes to institutions, as you say, Mary, it is very difficult. But as institutions, we, as a member of that institution, we already have the institutional power to do some of this work. This is not written for the leaders. This is not written for the experts in the field. This is for our work. And if we believe we're part of that, and if we believe in that institution strongly enough and into the values that they espouse, then we're going to work towards getting there and to amplifying that in all that we do. And if it doesn't work, if we are not aligned with that particular mission, then we might have to look for a new community.
I love the sentence that you say, Ms. Wright, about it's not what you look at that matters, but it's what you see. Seems to be kind of a summary of a lot of what you're talking about, that you really can't just look as a glance, but that the seeing is more in depth. It's more bringing in information from the other, or so I really appreciate that particular statement. I'm still rolling that one around in my head.
It is a very, very powerful statement, but I would love to be able to take it as my own, but that was Henry David Thoreau. And he said, it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. And actually my son, my youngest son, who was 8 years old at the time, he was the one who actually helped me to see that. He always looked for hearts in anything, in everything. He found that strawberry leaves look like hearts, and he showed me. He said, "Mommy, look, I can see the hearts. I can see the love in everything," he said to me. And then it was so infectious, this way that he was able to look at things and see beyond what was in front of him, to see something new and equally as real. And so my whole family, we all started looking for hearts in everything, in gum on the street, in rocks, in chicken nuggets, just about anything we could find. We looked for hearts and we found them. But what would it be to look at another and to see beyond what you think you see, to see beyond race or political affiliation or faith tradition or gender or age or ability? What if we were to be able to see beyond what we think we see and to see the vast potential and capacity in that other person to see their dignity?
I've been spending the last couple of years off and on re-looking, especially at those who put too much of themselves in the past administration. And partly I'm doing that because those are my family, where I grew up, that a lot of them were supporters. And I can see where a lot of that comes from, and that has helped. But on the other hand, there are some, I think maybe Emily alluded to this, where I don't know if I'll ever get there. I've re-looked at them and I see hatred. I see things that it's just totally antithetical to everything that I believe in.
It's hard. I wonder if we can, and as you said, you've looked and looked again at others and still you disagree with it. And I wonder if we think in this work of respecting dignity is that the ultimate goal is to agree with another, but that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to be able to understand, I think, and to see and understand where that is coming from. I know that there's a lot of loss that people are experiencing right now from all different areas in the United States. There's a lot of loss. And perhaps that loss is rooted in fear. And those emotions they occupy the same space as dignity. Loss, fear, vulnerability, all of that is in that same place. It's in you know, when you feel it in your stomach, that area, we can feel those very deep emotions. And I think in acknowledging that somebody's lost, we can acknowledge it and we can understand it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to agree with it.
Peter, I think for me, I really resonate with what you said, and it comes down for me to, is there space in my world for you? And are you allowed to be alive in my world? Is there space for you to live your life that way in my world? And I think it's so important that the answer always be yes to that question. But it's really challenging because, like I think Beth-Sarah's pointing out, there's a lot of fear of loss, you know, that if you let others exist in your world and they don't want the world to be the way you do, well, of course, you're at risk of losing that dream. You're at risk of losing your world. And it gets to be quite a conflict of trying to figure out how to allow for the lives of others, even if those lives and the way they're lived out threatens the world, the dream that you have.
Yes. And hence very, very strong emotions are manifest in those moments. Very, very strong emotions. Just imagine in your own life, just on an individual level, has there been a moment when you have felt like you were not seen? For whatever reason, you know, for whatever reason, I think we could all possibly find a moment where our dignity was violated in some way. And dignity violation, they call it, you know. Perhaps people assume something about us when that was not true, or they were not able to see my true intentions, or they were not or they assumed, oh, because you're a woman, or they assume because you're a man, you can't do this, or you assume because of your age, or assume because you are limited in some way physically. there are so many ways that in many ways that we do this to each other, but imagine on another level, how does that feel on a larger scale, on a societal or institutional level, when groups of people are feeling this way? And what can we do to address that and to bring light and shed light on that? But I'm seeing, Donna, our time is at 12:24. I know that many of you have lots of things to do on Sunday afternoon, and I do want to be certainly cognizant of your time and respectful of your time.
Thank you so very much. This was amazing. I really do appreciate it. And I do appreciate all the forums that we've had over the years. They have been so edifying. It is amazing what our community can think up of or be connected to. And you're one of our great speakers that we've ever had.
Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Wright, I cannot thank you enough. I couldn't help but think when you mentioned who is here and who is not here, my slight disappointment that more did not get to hear this, but let us hope that we heard this and that it'll keep our eyes wide open and our hearts strong and alive and keep it going. I cannot thank you enough, Dr. Wright, for your kindness and grace and expertise. Just fabulous.
Thank you so much. Thank you again, Donna, for this great invitation. I really do appreciate it. And my prayers are with you all. And as you think about your next steps, either as this adult forum or as your impact on your church community, as you think about that, I really do. My prayers are with you, and my prayers are that you will embrace that it is not what you look at that matters, but what you see. There's a lot of potential in the challenges that we face. So God bless you all.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Our hearts.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, we'll look for
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow.
Wow is right.
She was really good, guys. Really good.
Lots of notes, lots to try to build on or
Yeah.
just flesh
What
out
was the-
or revisit.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Do y'all remember the some years ago there was a movie that had avatars in it?
Oh yeah.
And there's
Blue people,
statements
Blue
dances with
people.
wolves
Right.
with blue people.
and the way that they greeted each other was "I see you."
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I just think there's something in that. So anyway.
I was struck with when she talks about, I have another session later today, which is some of the same types of things, except the big thing we're supposed to talk about, the topic is microaggressions. And I hate that term. And I was trying to figure out, why do I hate it? And when she's talking about a dignity violation, it's the flip in such a more beautiful and positive phrase that, like, if I didn't take anything else, and there's much other things to take from this, but I am going to propose in my meeting later today is just, I want us to roll this around in our head, this idea of a dignity violation. It's just more affirmative. It's more about seeing the other rather than staking out your territory or something. That the microaggression sounds so.
I like that.
So I'm loving the language of this, but I think it's very challenging too. Like my idea of yield is not how she thinks of yield, and the idea of quantitative and qualitative data just makes my head want to spin back and like, okay, how do I engage with this? But look, luckily this is recorded and we have a book and we'll have more time to grapple with this.
Oh, that's great. I see that it's being recorded. I didn't even think about that, but that's wonderful because we can make this available to
I was
others.
a little bit late hopping on, but I will send it to Jeremy to see if he can put it on the website. In fact, I should probably stop the recording at this point.
Yeah, I will.
Please.